The Terran Confederacy was losing. That was the simple, brutal fact known to every human on every surviving world. On the main screen of the bridge of the USS Blackstar, the war was represented by a cold, star-dusted void and the silent, growing red icons of the Ethel fleet. They were not like any enemy humanity had ever known. Their ships were smooth, dark shapes that moved wrong, seeming to slide through space rather than travel across it. They ignored the fundamental laws of physics that human technology was built upon. Kinetic barriers did nothing. Plasma bolts veered away. Worlds simply went dark, their communications ending not with a scream, but with a quiet, final sigh. Captain Lee Ji-hoon stood before his command chair, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. His face was a mask of calm, but the strain showed in the tight lines around his eyes. He had commanded frontline destroyers for 10 years. He knew the taste of fear and the smell of burning metal. This was different. This was the feeling of throwing stones at a tidal wave. For 3 months, he had watched brilliant captains and brave crews be erased from existence. Now it was his turn. But his ship was different. The Blackstar did not look like a warship. It was all sharp angles and matte black armor, absorbing the light from the distant stars. It hummed with a low, sub-audible vibration that could be felt in the bones, not heard with the ears. The crew, the best in the fleet, had been assembled with no explanation. They knew their posts, they knew the basic layout of the strange vessel, but they did not know its purpose. Only Captain Lee had received the final briefing, and the memory of it lay like ice in his stomach. Status of the Ethel vessel? Lee's voice was low and even. Commander Park Soo-min, his first officer, glanced up from her data screen. Her expression was all sharp focus. Designated target is holding position near the outer debris ring of planetoid Theta 7. It's a siege-class captain, approximately 5 times our mass. Energy signatures match the profiles from the fall of New Geneva. The name of the lost colony hung in the air. 10 million people. Gone. Our orders are clear, Lee said, not turning. Intercept and neutralize. Weapons Officer Kim, prepare a full salvo from the primary magnetic cannons. Let us see if this ship can do what others could not. Lieutenant Kim Tae-shik's hands flew over his console. His jaw was set. Cannons charged, Captain. Targeting solution locked. They're not even moving. It's like they're ignoring us. Fire. The ship shuddered as the massive cannons launched their projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. On the screen, brilliant lances of light streaked across the dark. They struck the smooth, dark hull of the Ethel ship and dissipated in silent, shimmering waves of energy. No impact, no damage. The alien vessel remained, an impassive monolith. No effect, Kim reported, his voice tight with frustration. Barrier technology is beyond anything in our database. They're just soaking it up. Dr. Kang Yoon-ji, the science officer, leaned forward from her station. Readings indicate the energy wasn't reflected or absorbed in a conventional sense, Captain. It was translated, shifted into a different energy state. It's as if our laws of physics are merely a suggestion to them. Deploy swarm missiles. Pattern Delta. Lee ordered. The missiles erupted from the Blackstar's launch bays, a cloud of intelligent death weaving through space. As they closed in, the Ethel ship finally reacted. It didn't fire. Instead, space around it seemed to warp. The missiles simply winked out of existence, one by one, as if they had flown into invisible holes in the universe. A cold silence descended on the bridge. Ambassador Choi Ha-yeon, who had observed the conflict with a pale, grim face, finally spoke from the observation gallery. Captain, we have demonstrated our inability to harm them. This is the pattern of every engagement. We must attempt communication. There must be a reason for this conflict. A point of understanding we have missed. Lee closed his eyes for a second. He respected Choi Hai-yen, but the diplomat lived in a world of words. The Ethel had never spoken, never communicated, never demanded surrender. They only erased. Your point is noted, Ambassador, but our orders stand. We are to neutralize the target. He turned to his first officer. Commander Park, your analysis? Park Suman's eyes were fixed on her screens, running calculations. Conventional weaponry is useless, Captain. Their defensive capabilities operate on a level we do not comprehend. To engage them on their terms is to lose. She paused, then looked directly at him. We must engage them on our terms? With the asset only the ship possesses. A heavy weight settled on Lee's shoulders. He knew the phrase from his briefing. The final option. The Event Horizon gun. He had seen no schematics, no test data. Only a set of activation codes and a single, ominous line. The effect is total. Lieutenant Kim, Lee said, his voice even quieter. Stand down all conventional systems. Prepare the primary weapon system. Authorization code Lee 79er Omega. A new tension, different from the fear of battle, crackled through the bridge. Kim's fingers hesitated for a moment before inputting the code. On his console, an entirely new set of displays flickered to life, showing geometries and energy readings that made no sense. A deep, throbbing hum, lower than anything before, began to pulse through the deck. System charging, Kim reported, his eyes wide as he tried to interpret the data. I don't understand the power source. The readings are off the scale. It's drawing from something internal. Dr. Kang Junji left her station, drawn to the science feed on Kim's panel. This is impossible, she whispered. These energy signatures, they're not from our dimension. They're reading like a controlled singularity, but the containment field, it's theoretical. It can't exist. On the main viewer, the Ethel ship began to move. For the first time, it turned, presenting its broadside to the Blackstar. A faint, menacing purple glow began to build along its spine. They were preparing to fire. Weapon at 90% charge, Kim said, urgency cutting through his confusion. Target the siege-class vessel, Captain Lee ordered. The words felt like ash in his mouth. Target locked. The hum reached a crescendo, a physical pressure in the air. Lee took a final breath. Fire! Lieutenant Kim pressed the activation rune. There was no brilliant beam, no volley of missiles, no explosion of light. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, space itself seemed to stutter. At the location of the Ethel ship, a perfect ink-black sphere appeared. It was not an explosion. It was an erasure. One moment the massive, invincible alien vessel was there. The next, it was gone. The sphere of absolute blackness persisted for a few heartbeats, perhaps a kilometer across, and then it too vanished. Where the Ethel ship had been, there was now empty space. But it was a wrong kind of empty. The distant stars behind that spot were visible, but they shimmered oddly, as if seen through a heat haze. The surrounding debris field, thousands of asteroids and metallic fragments, was now perfectly, cleanly scooped away. The edges of the missing area were smooth, curved, as if a god had taken a melon baller to the cosmos. The bridge was utterly, profoundly silent. The crew stared at the main screen, their minds refusing to process what their eyes had seen. Dr. Kang Ji was the first to move, stumbling back to her science station. Her hands trembled as she called up the sensor logs. The target is gone. No debris. No energy residue. No radioactive decay signature. Her voice was hollow with awe and terror. Sensors indicate a localized absence, not just of the ship, but of space-time itself. The mass, the energy, the very coordinates have been deleted from the local causal framework. She looked up, her face pale. Captain, we didn't destroy it. We made it so it never was. Captain Lee Ji-hoon slowly lowered himself into his command chair. The victory was absolute, total, and it tasted like ashes and ice. He looked at the screen, at the perfect, terrible void they had created. The USS Blackstar had entered the conflict, and nothing, it seemed, could withstand its fire. The thought brought him no pride, only a deep, chilling dread for what they had just unleashed and what they would have to become to use it again. The victory at planetoid Theta 7 was not celebrated. It was reported. The message from High Command was brief and clear. Confirmed kill. Proceed to grid Lambda 4. New target designated. There was no congratulations, no inquiry about their new weapon. It was as if they had simply completed a routine training exercise. For the crew of the Blackstar, however, nothing would ever be routine again. Captain Lee Ji-hoon sat in his small, Spartan quarters, staring at the official dispatch on his datapad. The words were dry and military. He saw other things. The smooth, curved edge of the nothingness they had created. The shimmering stars beyond it. He had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the Ethel ship not being destroyed, but being unmade. He thought of Ambassador Choi Hyun's words. Existential violence. The term felt too academic for the raw, wrong feeling in his gut. A chime sounded. Commander Park Soo-min entered. Her uniform was perfect, her face composed, but Lee saw the same shadow in her eyes that he felt in his own soul. "The crew is holding, Captain," she said, her voice professional. "Efficiency ratings are within norms. But there is a tension. They are waiting for an explanation we cannot give." "Can we, Commander?" Lee asked, setting the pad down. "Do we have an explanation?" "Do you?" Park Soo-min hesitated. She was a woman of logic and data. "The weapon functions. It eliminates the threat with 100% efficiency. In a war for survival, that is the only data point that matters." She paused, then added quietly, "But Lieutenant Kim has sent me preliminary reports from the weapons housing. After the firing sequence, there are residual energy signatures. They do not decay normally. They linger." Lee nodded slowly. "And Dr. Kong?" "Has been in the main science lab for 12 hours straight. She requested full access to the weapon's non-classified telemetry. I approved it." "Let's go see what she's found," Lee said, rising. He needed facts, even terrible ones. They found Dr. Kang Yoon-ji surrounded by holographic schematics and swirling data streams. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but they burned with a fierce intensity. On a secondary screen was the sensor log from the engagement, frozen on the moment of the perfect black sphere. "Captain," she said without preamble, her voice hoarse, "it's worse than I thought. The effect is not clean." "You said it was erased," Park Soo-min stated. "It was. But erase a file on a computer, and traces can remain in the memory. This is similar, but on a universal scale." She manipulated the controls. The screen zoomed in on the edge of the void, enhancing the shimmering effect. "See this quantum haze? It's a scar. The local spacetime is wounded. The rules are bent there now. My instruments are detecting faint probabilistic echoes." "Echoes of what?" Lee asked. "Of the Ethel ship. Of the asteroids. They are not there. But the universe, on some fundamental level, remembers that they were. It's a ghost. A permanent one." She pulled up another readout, a complex graph of energy spikes. "This is from inside our own power conduits, post-firing. The weapon draws power from an extra-dimensional source, but the transfer is not perfect. There is a bleed back, a kind of metaphysical contamination. Each time we fire, we are not just shooting at the enemy. We are poisoning the space around us and possibly ourselves. The door hissed open, and Ambassador Choi Hyun entered. He looked older, the weight of their actions etching new lines on his face. "I have been listening to the ship-wide comms," he said. "The crew speaks in whispers. They call it the unmaking gun. They are afraid of it." "They should be," Kang Yoon-ji said bluntly. "High Command is not," Park Soo-min countered. "They have sent us 3 new target coordinates. The Ethel fleet is massing near the colony world of Aurora. Millions of lives are at stake. The Blackstar is the only tool that can stop them." "It is not a tool." Choi Hyun's calm finally broke. "A tool builds or repairs. This thing, it only destroys in the most absolute way possible. We are not soldiers anymore. We are become exterminators, wiping a stain from reality. What if the Ethel are not merely enemies to be destroyed? What if they are trying to tell us something, and we are too busy erasing them to listen?" Captain Lee looked from the diplomat's anguish to the scientist's cold dread to his first officer's grim practicality. He was the point where all these tensions met. "Our duty is to protect humanity, Ambassador. That is the simple, brutal calculus of war. Dr. Kong, continue your analysis. I want to know every consequence, every risk. Commander Park, plot the course for the Aurora system. We will engage the fleet." The journey took 2 days. The tension on the ship was a living thing. Crew members avoided each other's eyes. Lieutenant Kim Tae-shik was often found in the weapon control bay, not running diagnostics, but just staring at the housing of the Event Horizon gun as if it were a sleeping dragon. He had been the one to press the button. He felt marked by it. The Aurora system glimmered on the main screen. It was a beautiful blue-green world. And surrounding it, like a swarm of dark insects, were the red icons of the Ethel fleet. Dozens of ships. A force that could crush any human armada. "The fleet is deploying in a planetary siege formation," Park Soo-min reported, her voice all business. "They are ignoring our approach. Again." "Standard protocol," Lee said. "Single target, largest vessel first. Lieutenant Kim, prepare the primary weapon." Kim's voice was flat over the comb. "Preparing. Charge sequence initiating." The now familiar deep hum began to vibrate through the ship. Lee saw Dr. Kang flinch at her station as her instruments spiked. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. The silent flash. The perfect black sphere bloomed among the Ethel fleet. A cruiser, twice the size of the first, vanished from existence. The sphere collapsed. A new scar on reality. On the bridge, a young ensign at the environmental control station suddenly cried out, dropping his stylus. "Sir," for a second, the air. It tasted like metal. And I saw. He shook his head, confused. Dr. Kong was on it instantly. Localized temporal fluctuation on deck 4. Lasted 0.3 seconds. A minor causality loop. She looked at Lee, her face pale. "The bleed back. It's getting stronger. The weapon's effect is not fully contained. It's leaking into our own ship." Captain Lee's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. "Continue the engagement. Next target." They fired again. And again. Each time, a portion of the Ethel fleet was cleanly, silently excised. Each time, the strange hum lingered a little longer. Each time, small, impossible things happened on the Blackstar. A glass of water sat on a console was seen to shatter, then be whole again. A navigation officer reported seeing his own double walk past a corridor junction. The air grew cold in patches, smelling of ozone and something else, something stale and empty. They were winning. The Ethel fleet, this unstoppable force, was being dismantled piece by piece. No human ship had ever achieved such a victory. On the main screen, the beautiful world of Aurora was safe. its blue-green glow untouched. On the bridge of the Blackstar, the crew worked in silence, wrapped in a cold that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. They watched as their captain gave the orders, as their weapons officer pressed the button, as their science officer recorded the decay of reality around them. They had saved millions. And as Lieutenant Kim Tae-shik prepared for the next firing sequence, his hand hovering over the control, he looked at the weapon's power rating, now showing a strange, recursive symbol he did not recognize. He understood Dr. Kang's words now. They were poisoning themselves. The USS Blackstar could withstand any enemy fire, but could it withstand its own? The victory at Aurora was broadcast across the Terran Confederacy. The USS Blackstar and its crew were hailed as the saviors of humanity. News feeds showed animated recreations of the dark spheres swallowing Aethel ships. Captain Lee Ji-hoon's face, grim and unsmiling, was plastered on every screen, a symbol of grim determination. The crew received medals they never saw and commendations they never read. Inside the ship, there were no celebrations. There was only the hum, the cold, and the ghosts. The Blackstar was ordered to the Omicron frontier, where the largest recorded Aethel force was gathering. It was to be the final, decisive battle. The ship moved through the void, a silent predator. But its prey was no longer just the Aethel. Lieutenant Kim Tae-shik sat in the weapon control bay, a small sealed room directly adjacent to the housing of the Event Horizon gun. The air here was always colder. The deep hum was a constant presence, a sound felt in the teeth. He was running the mandatory pre-engagement diagnostics, but his eyes were fixed on a secondary monitor. It displayed the recursive energy signature Dr. Kang had identified. After Aurora, it no longer decayed. It had plateaued at a low, steady level, a permanent scar within their own systems. He called up the firing log. 7 uses. 7 voids created. 7 recursive spikes, each one layering onto the last. The graph looked like a staircase leading down into some unknowable abyss. A quiet chime announced a visitor. He turned to see Dr. Kang Yoon-ji enter, her data pad in hand. Her expression was severe. "You see it too," she said, not as a question. Kim just nodded, gesturing to the screen. "It's not going away. It's nesting." "It's more than that," Kang replied. She pulled up a file on her pad and sensed it to his monitor. It showed a complex model of the Blackstar's power core, wrapped in layers of theoretical physics. The weapon doesn't just open a door to null space and close it. It creates a bridge. And each time we use it, the bridge widens. The door stays open a fraction longer. Those ghosts you see on deck, the temporal echoes, they're not malfunctions. They're leaks. Kim stared at the model. He was a weapons officer, not a theoretical physicist, but the implication was clear enough. So each shot makes the next one more dangerous. For us, for everything, Kang corrected softly. The contamination is not limited to the target area. It propagates along the firing path. We are leaving a trail of spoiled reality, like a wound that will not heal. She looked at him, her professional detachment cracking to show the fear beneath. "Lieutenant, the next time you fire that weapon, I cannot predict what will happen on this ship. The bleed-through could be catastrophic." On the bridge, Captain Lee was reviewing the tactical data for the Omicron system. The Aethel force was immense. Commander Park Soo-min stood beside him, her voice low. High Command strategy is simple. We jump in, we fire until nothing is left. They believe the war will be over in a matter of hours. She paused. "Dr. Kang's latest report is on your terminal. It is alarming." Lee had read it. The cold feeling in his stomach had become a permanent resident. Her conclusions? That the Blackstar is becoming unstable. that the weapon is a threat to its operators, that we may be causing permanent damage to the fabric of space itself. Park's voice was devoid of emotion, stating facts. The logical course is to report this to High Command and stand down. And if they order us to fire anyway? Lee asked, already knowing the answer. Then we follow orders, Park said, but her eyes held a question she would not voice. Ambassador Choi Hye-in approached. He had taken to spending his time on the bridge, a silent witness. Captain, a request. Before we engage at Omicron, let me attempt a broadcast. A simple, repeated signal. A request for parley. We now have their absolute attention. They must know what this ship can do. Perhaps now, from a position of strength, they will communicate. Lee considered it. It was against orders. Engagement protocols were explicit. No communication attempts. The Ethel were to be eliminated. But Choi's words made a terrible sense. What were they fighting for, if not to preserve something? What were they becoming in the process? Prepare your message, Ambassador. You will have 1 hour before we jump into the system. The jump was uneventful. The emergence into the Omicron system, however, was not. Before them, hanging in the dark, was the Ethel Armada. Hundreds of ships, arranged in a complex, beautiful, and terrifying pattern around a faint, dying star. They did not move to attack. No aggressive posturing. Park Soo-min noted, her brow furrowed. It's a defensive formation. Almost. Ceremonial. Broadcasting Ambassador Choi's message on all frequencies, a comms officer reported. Minutes passed. The Ethel fleet was silent, immobile. Weapon is charged and ready. Lieutenant Kim's voice came over the comm, tight with strain. The recursive signature is spiking. I'm reading. Feedback in the containment field. It's unstable, Captain. Hold fire, Lee ordered. He watched the silent fleet. Something is wrong. Then, a single, smaller Ethel vessel detached from the center of the formation. It did not move like a warship. It glided smoothly towards them, alone. It was a gesture. They're hailing us, the comms officer said, disbelief in his voice. A single tight beam beta stream. No audio or visual. It's pure information. Put it on Dr. Kong's station. Lee said. Kong Yoonji's hands flew over her console, decoding. Her face, lit by the blue glow of the data, went from curiosity to confusion, then to dawning horror. Captain, it's not a message. It's a map, a star chart, and medical data, biological scans. Of us, of humans, and of them. She looked up, her eyes wide. They're showing us their biology. And it's not alien. Not in the way we thought. The underlying biochemical structures, they're compatible. They share a common base with terrestrial life. This is impossible. Before anyone could process this, alarms blared on Kim's weapon control panel. Containment failure. The gun's core is overloading. I can't stop the cycle. It's going to fire on its own. Target? Lee barked. The lead ship. The one sending the data? Divert power. Shut it down. I can't. The system is locked. On the main screen, the smooth, innocent Ethel vessel continued its slow approach, its data stream pouring into their computers. Then, with a sickening lurch that felt like the universe skipping a beat, the Event Horizon gun fired. There was no black sphere this time. The effect was a distorted, shimmering blotch of darkness. It struck the Ethel ship not as a clean erasure, but as a tearing. The forward half of the vessel vanished into the null sphere. The remaining aft section was sheared off, but it did not explode. It was cut with impossible geometric precision, the edges glowing with a faint, wrong light. The broken piece of ship hung in space, dead. On the bridge of the Blackstar, chaos erupted in silence. Every light and screen flickered madly. For 3 full seconds, time fractured. Captain Lee saw Commander Park standing beside him. Then he saw her sitting at her station. Then he saw her turning to speak, all at once. He heard the comms officer report the weapon, firing a second before Kim's warning had even left his lips. He felt a wave of nausea as the universe stuttered. Then it snapped back. The crew was at their posts, panting, clutching their consoles. No one spoke. The taste of metal was thick in the air. Dr. Kang's voice was a broken whisper as her systems rebooted. Localized reality collapse. The weapon's effect. It echoed back through the firing path. We just experienced a causality loop. We are inside the contamination field. On the main viewer, the horrific bisected ethel ship drifted. The rest of the massive armada had not moved. They simply watched. Lieutenant Kim's voice was hollow with shock over the open channel. The weapon is offline. Containment field integrity is at 12%. Another firing sequence will breach it completely. He took a shaky breath. Captain, the flaw isn't in the system. The flaw is in the physics. We are breaking the universe. And the break is starting here, with us. Captain Lee looked from the maimed alien ship to the terrified face of his science officer, to the pale, stoic mask of his first officer. The Ethel had finally communicated. They had offered not a threat, but information. And in response, the Blackstar had given them a grotesque, partial death. The weapon was no longer just a danger to their enemies. It was a bomb on a short fuse, and they were sitting at its heart. The final battle was waiting, but they could no longer fight it. They had become the very catastrophe they were meant to prevent. The bisected Ethel ship hung in the void, a silent monument to the flaw in their god-killer. The massive alien armada surrounding the Blackstar did not attack. They held their positions, a silent, dark wall against the stars. The atmosphere on the bridge was one of stunned paralysis. The taste of temporal fracture like copper and statics still lingered in the air. Captain Lee Ji-hoon gripped the arms of his command chair, his knuckles white. Report, casualties, damage. Commander Park Soo-min's voice was clipped, automatic, as she scanned her displays. No physical injuries. All systems report nominal now, but we have multiple confirmed instances of temporal displacement across all decks. Crew members experiencing déjà vu, premonitions, seeing brief double images. The effect lasted approximately 3 seconds. Dr. Kang Eun-ji was hunched over her science station, her face illuminated by the frantic scroll of data. It was a localized causality rupture. The weapon's firing created a feedback loop through its own contaminated pathway. We didn't just shoot at them, Captain. We briefly unmade a fraction of our own timeline. The ship's chronometers are out of sync by 0.004 seconds. That's an eternity in quantum terms. The most chilling report came from Lieutenant Kim Tae-shik, his voice thin over the comm. Primary weapon system is in full lockdown. Containment integrity is critical. The recursive energy signature has increased by 400%. It's not stable, sir. It's like a wound that won't stop bleeding. I cannot guarantee a controlled firing sequence. The next shot could breach containment entirely. A pause. If that happens, the null space field would expand unchecked. It would consume the Blackstar first. Ambassador Choi Hyan moved from the observation gallery to stand beside the captain's chair. He did not look triumphant, only profoundly weary. They were communicating, Captain. They were sending us data, biological and historical archives. And we answered with that. He pointed a trembling hand at the main screen, at the clean, glowing cut through the Ethel vessel. Lee followed his gaze. The horror of the mangled ship was bad enough, but the silence of the surrounding armada was worse. They were being judged. Dr. Kong, can you decode the rest of the transmission? What were they sending us? I'm trying, Captain, Kong said, her fingers flying. The data stream was cut off when we fired, but the partial download is staggering. It's not just biology. It's a historical record. A warning. She pulled a key sequence onto the main screen for all to see. It was a star map, but not of the present. It showed the galaxy as it was millennia ago. A highlight pulsed around a system now listed in Terran databases as dead space, hazard, extreme gravimetric anomalies. Then, imagery. Strange, elegant ships not unlike the Ethels, firing weapons that created familiar perfect black spheres. The spheres multiplied, wiping out world after world in a war against an enemy labeled only with a symbol of consumption. The Ethel, or their ancestors, were the ones firing the weapon. The weapon is not new, Kang whispered. They invented it. They used it to win a war. And then the imagery changed. It showed the beautiful spheres beginning to distort, to shimmer. Scars of wrongness spread across star systems like cracks in glass. Ships flickered in and out of existence. Whole planets were not destroyed, but became ghostly, mirage-like. They couldn't control it. The effect began to spread. A chain reaction of reality decay. The final image was of the surviving Ethel vessels surrounding their own homeworld, not to protect it from an enemy, but to contain it. A massive shimmering scar enveloped the planet. A quarantine, their homeworld. Park Soo-min said, understanding dawning. They lost it, not to an enemy, but to their own weapon. The ultimate collateral damage. The transmission labels the technology as the Devourer. Kong continued, her voice hollow. They spent the next ages hunting down every trace of the research, containing the breaches, and enforcing a galactic quarantine on anyone who came close to rediscovering it. Their attacks on our colonies? The timeline matches our first successful tests into null space physics at the Horizon Research Division. They weren't invading us. They were trying to sterilize an outbreak. The realization settled over the bridge like a physical weight. The war, the loss of life, the terror, it had all been a desperate, brutal attempt at containment. Humanity, in its fight for survival, had dug up the very plague the Ethel had buried. So we are the disease, Choi Hyen said, the words falling into the silence. We are the infected, Lee corrected, the full weight of his command crushing down on him. He had followed orders. He had saved worlds. And in doing so, he had potentially doomed all of them. He looked at the bisected ship. And that was our symptom. As if on cue, the Ethel Armada moved. It was not an attack. The ships shifted in a complex, synchronized maneuver, opening a lane directly from the Blackstar to the center of the formation. There, floating near the dim star, was a structure. It was not a ship. It was a station or a beacon, a smooth, dark sphere covered in intricate patterns. A directed energy pulse is targeting us, the comms officer said. No weapons fire. It's another data stream, much larger. Put it through to Dr. Kang, Lee ordered. This stream was different. It contained no history, no biology. It was physics, mathematics, schematics. Kong worked furiously, her eyes widening. It's a solution. A set of calculations. For us? For what? For using the Event Horizon gun one final time. She pulled up a complex equation on the main screen. They are giving us the precise energy modulation to cause a controlled collapse. If we fire the weapon at its own power core, from within, using these parameters, it would create an implosive null field. It would swallow the weapon, the contamination, and... She stopped, and the ship, Lieutenant Kim finished over the open channel, his voice calm now with dreadful understanding. The implosion radius. It would encompass the entire Blackstar. Silence. They are not asking for our surrender, Commander Park said, her analytical mind already working. They are offering a cure. The only one possible. The infected vessel must be sterilized to prevent the spread. Or we could try to run, Kim said, a faint hope in his voice. Jump away. Back to Confederate space. Dr. Kang shook her head, pulling up a scan of their own power core. The recursive infection is woven into our systems now. The bleed-through is accelerating. Every jump, every energy surge, risks widening the breach. We could arrive at Earth with a runaway null field eating our ship from the inside out. We would not be bringing home a weapon. We would be bringing home a terminal cancer for reality itself. Captain Lei looked around his bridge. At Park Soo-min, the logical mind accepting the brutal calculus. At Dr. Kang Yoonji, who had uncovered the terrible truth. At the ghostly image of Lieutenant Kim on the com screen, the man who had pulled the trigger. At Ambassador Choi Hye-in, whose pleas for understanding had been tragically vindicated. The Ethel were not monsters. They were doctors, and they were presenting him with the only surgical option left. He took a deep breath. The conflict was over. A new, more terrible decision had begun. He had led his crew into battle. Now he had to lead them into sacrifice. Lieutenant Kim, Lee said, his voice firm and clear, carrying across the silent bridge. Using the schematics provided by the Ethel, calculate the exact parameters for the implosive sequence. I need to know the required position, the energy levels, and, he forced the words out, the safe evacuation distance for escape pods. The order hung in the air. No one protested. They all understood. The USS Blackstar had entered the conflict, and nothing could withstand its fire. In the end, that included itself. Their final mission was not to destroy an enemy, but to destroy the destruction they carried. The hum of the Blackstar was different now. It was a tired, wounded sound, like the labored heartbeat of a dying beast. On the bridge, the air was cold and still. Captain Lee Ji-hoon had given the only order he could. The crew moved with a quiet, grim purpose. There were no arguments, no panic. The truth, once known, was too heavy to fight against. Throughout the ship, the evacuation alarm sounded a steady, pulsing tone. Crew members secured their stations and moved in orderly lines to the escape pod bays. There were no tears, only muted farewells and firm handshakes. They had been to the edge of existence and back, and the terror of the weapon had drained them of everything but a profound exhaustion. They trusted their captain. They knew the math dot in the main launch bay. Commander Park Soo-min oversaw the final departures. Her face was a mask of calm efficiency as she checked manifests and directed traffic. A young ensign, clutching a datapad, hesitated before entering his pod. Commander, will it work? Will they be safe? He meant the Ethel. At Galaxy.Park met his gaze. The calculations are sound. It is the logical solution. It was not a warm answer, but it was true, and the ensign found some comfort in that truth. He nodded and entered the pod. As the bay emptied, Park's composure did not break. She had run the numbers herself. The Ethel's equations were elegant and devastatingly complete. This was the only way to close the wound they had opened. She took one last look at the bustling, purposeful activity, then turned and walked back toward the bridge. Her path was not to a pod. She had made her own calculation dot in the weapon control bay. Lieutenant Kim Tae-shik was alone. His screens displayed the Ethel's implosion sequence. It was a beautiful, terrible piece of work. He had verified every line of code, every energy modulation. It would work. He input the final commands, setting the sequence on a timer, synced to the captain's signal. His hands were steady. This was the last duty for his weapon, the final containment. He felt a strange peace. He had been its operator. He would be its guide into oblivion. He shut down the external consoles, leaving only the core system active, a single glowing rune waiting to be pressed. He did not head for the escape pods. He sat down on a maintenance crate, watching the rune pulse, and waited. Dr. Kang Yun-ji was in the main science lab, frantically transmitting data. She was sending everything: the Ethel's history, the weapon's flaws, the scans of the reality scars, on a continuous loop towards the nearest Confederate listening post. It was a warning and a confession. She knew it might take years to arrive, but she had to try. As the final file uploaded, she looked at the empty lab, at the ghostly images of cosmic scars still on her screens. Her curiosity had led her to the heart of the mystery. She would not run from the answer. She closed the transmission, erased the core systems, and walked calmly to the bridge to join her captain. Ambassador Choi Hai-yan stood by the viewport on the bridge, watching the last of the escape pods jet away from the ship, tiny sparks of light fleeing the dark, angular mass of the Blackstar. The Ethel Armada had pulled back to a safe distance, forming a wide, silent ring around them. They were witnesses. They are honoring the sacrifice, he said softly. They understand its necessity. Lee stood at his command station, watching the status lights blink from green to red as sections of the ship were emptied and sealed. It is not a sacrifice they asked for, Ambassador. It is one we forced upon ourselves. He turned to see Commander Park enter the bridge and take her station without a word. Then Dr. Kong arrived, giving a small nod. He knew without asking that Kim would still be in the weapon bay. His bridge crew was complete. All pods away, Captain, Park reported. The ship is ours. Lee moved to the center of the bridge. He looked at each of them, the logical first officer, the inquisitive scientist, the principled diplomat. You do not have to stay. The sequence is automated. You can still take the captain's yacht. Park Soo-min spoke first. My place is here. To the end. Her voice held no regret. The data is sent, Kang Yun-ji said. My work is done. I will see the consequences of my findings. Choi Hai-yan offered a sad, gentle smile. I spent my life seeking peace and understanding. I have found it here in this terrible, necessary thing. I will not look away. Captain Lee felt a surge of something that was not pride, but a deep, solemn gratitude. He returned to his chair. Lieutenant Kim, this is the captain. Prepare for final sequence. Authorization, Lee Omega Zero. Kim's voice came back, clear and calm. Sequence ready, Captain. Implosion timer is set for your mark. The weapon is waiting. There was a pause. It has been an honor, sir. The honor has been mine, Lieutenant. Lee took a final look at the main screen, at the beautiful, terrible Ethel ships holding their distance, at the dim light of the star, at the endless dark. Execute. On Kim's panel, the final rune glowed bright. He pressed it. There was no hung this time. Instead, a deep silence seemed to pull at the ship, as if all sound was being sucked into a drain. The lights on the bridge dimmed. The main screen showed the view from the ship's external cameras. For a moment, nothing. Then from the heart of the Blackstar, a point of absolute darkness appeared. It was not a sphere that expanded outward. It was a vortex that pulled inward. The ship's mighty hull, the impenetrable black armor, began to crumple like paper being drawn into a flame. It did not break or shatter. It folded seamlessly, silently into the growing point of nullity. On the bridge, there was no shaking, no violent tremor. The air grew thin and cold. The light became gray and stretched. Captain Lee saw the faces of his crew, not as they were, but as echoes of moments before Park reviewing a data stream, Kong adjusting her sensors, Choi looking at the stars. Then for an instant, he saw them as children, as old men and women, as possibilities that would now never be. Time was unraveling at the edges. He reached out and found Commander Park's hand on the armrest next to him. Their eyes met. There were no last words. None were needed. The void reached the bridge. The darkness was not black. It was the absence of everything light, sound, heat, thought. It was not an end, but an unmaking. From the ring of Ethel ships, they observed. The USS Blackstar, the terrible, beautiful mistake, collapsed into a perfect, tiny sphere of nothingness. It hung in space for a heartbeat, a punctuation mark of absolute finality. Then, with a silent flash that registered on instruments as it dropped to zero in all energy readings, it vanished. Where the ship had been, there was only clean, unscarred space. The recursive infection, the weapon, the crew, all of it was gone. Not destroyed, erased. Healed. The Ethel fleet lingered for a time. Then, with the same silent grace with which they did all things, they turned as one and began to move away, their smooth, dark ships slipping into the deeper dark between the stars. Their quarantine duty for this sector was complete. Far away, the escape pods drifted, carrying the survivors toward an uncertain future. They would tell the story of the Blackstar, not as a weapon, but as a warning. They would speak of a captain who chose to pay the price, and a crew who chose to stand with him. The war was over. It had ended not with the triumphant roar of a weapon that nothing could withstand, but with its silent, self-inflicted absence. And in that void, there was a fragile, hard-won chance for peace.